mid-19th century, political changes around Europe took place, and as a result of this, in 1848, Richard Wagner leaves Dresden in exile of Germany, and he moves to Zurich, where he wrote a few things. He wrote Art and Revolution, The Artwork of the Future, and Opera and Drama, amongst a lot of other essays on these topics. He also wrote some interesting essays on topics of art and nature, composition techniques, and social affairs and his political views. At this point in time, the Romanticists viewed music as a dominant art form. But Wagner, although a musician, opposed this idea, and he thought he was much the servant of a poet. Wagner's theory of opera, or rather music drama, he labelled Gesamtkunstwerk, which was a label that described the mergence of all the arts working together in a powerful unity. So this effort to unify all the art forms, conserving the purity of each one, was supported by a lot of his contemporaries. The composer Gustav Mahler introduced elements from nature into classical music and composition. He used a lot of unusual chords and breaks within his compositions, and he really started to get creative with the melody, using a lot of juxtaposition. This mix implied the apparition of distant harmonies that overtook the music sometimes. Claude Debussy became popular with his classic romantic compositions by developing a music language that was more free and open. His symphonic poem Prélude à l'après-midi de Faun is inspired by a symbolic poem of Marlem, whose poem by the same name, Afternoon of a Faun, was published in 1876 with illustrations by his close friend, the painter Manet. This poem is also the basis of a ballet choreographed by Sergei Diaghilev, and also performed by Václav Nijinsky. Another key composer to understand innovation and changes in musical structures was Igor Stravinsky. His musical composition, called Petrushka in 1911, used polytonal textures and rhythmic ruptures. This innovation in structure was further developed later by other composers, as for example Charles Ives in the Industrial Symphony 4 and Bela Bartok. In his work, Bela Bartok explored the dialectics between chroma structures and diatonic structures, redefining the nature and function of scales and rhythms in Occidental harmonies. Early on in the 20th century, art and poetry began a deviating process from the traditional norms. The development of musical instruments to produce and modify sound by electric means started with an invention in 1897 of the telharmonium, which was also known as the dynamophone. This musical instrument, invented by Thaddeus Cahill, was an immense structure developed with an intention to emit music through a telephone network. The dynamophone was an antecedent of streaming technology, and its principles are the basis of what went on to form the Hammond organs. The composer Erik Satie is a precursor for concepts of surrealism and minimalism. His work involved a formal and tonal rupture in contemporary music. Satie is a forerunner of ambient music and conceptual art. His work in furniture music was a predecessor of ambient music, and it's not meant to be a centerpiece for a silent audience. In 1907, Ferruccio Busoni published the work Entwurf einer neuen Ästhetik der Kunst, and started to predict how composition with electronic sounds would create microtonal music. The seeds to electronic music start to grow when scientists and musicians worked together and created the first devices which would develop to become synthesizers. And this brings us to the work of Luigi Russolo, the Italian futurist painter and composer. Russolo wrote The Art of Noises in 1913, and he also invented a noise generator instrument called the Intenaro Mori. Although the audience rejected his pioneering performance in the Gran Concerto Futuristico in 1917, and none of the original devices have survived, although recent developments have been made based on the Internaru Mori and used in contemporary performance. Parade in 1917 was also another landmark audiovisual performance. A ballet produced by John Cocteau, with designs by Pablo Picasso, was choreographed by Leonard Massini and with music by Erik Satie. In this performance, many sound effects were employed, such as the Morse alphabet, and sirens and steam motors, the motor of an aeroplane, and typing machines. It's an early example of found material as a musical resource. In 1912, Pablo Picasso became interested in cinema as a work medium. By that time, Kandinsky had started 2 projects of visual music that would not reach a conclusion. These 2 works were the films Die Glückliche Hand in 1913, which was a collaboration with Arnold Schönberg, and an opera without dialogues, Der Klipp Klang, which means the yellow sound, produced in 1912. All of these projects looked at the idea of a synesthetic artwork, where colour, movement and sound fused to produce an expressive and singular phenomena with the audience. From here, a lot of new ideas about synesthesia started to evolve. Kandinsky published his own ideas on colour and synesthesia in his book On the Spiritual in Art, which was published in 1911. Using elements from symbolism and surrealism, the work of Kandinsky strongly influenced authors like Arnold Schönberg and Luther Schreyer. Schreyer went on to build a whole theory of German theatre and performance, inspired by the expressive process priorly suggested in Yellow Sound. Laszlo Moholy-Nagy in 1922 used phonograph discs with the electronic Ons Martenot to produce music. The Ons Martenot is an electronic device invented in 1928 by Maurice Martenot, a French engineer and cellist. The Ons Martenot produced one single sound similar to the theremin, and was created by using a keyboard, a low-frequency generator, and a loudspeaker. His first presentation took place in Paris in 1928 at the Conservatory. But other prominent classic composers of that time used the Ons Martenot. It has also been used in popular music by Brian Ferry and Johnny Greenwood. Arnold Schönberg developed a method called 12-note composition, also known as 12-note technique, and the dodecaphonic method. In this composition technique, Arnold was determined not to use one note more than another. Schönberg and Kandinsky shared philosophical, artistic and aesthetical concepts, and while Kandinsky was moving away from the figurative paintings towards abstracts and watercolours, Schönberg was moving away from tonality. The dodecaphonic method was used by composers for the Second Viennese School, Anton von Webern, Alban Berg and Hans Eisler. Alban Berg mixed the dodecaphonic method with classical methods in a film as part of the score. This is visible in his second and inconcluded opera Lulu. Anton von Webern will avoid the lineal and continuous thematic presentation of Schönberg, who influenced Pierre Boulez and Karl-Heinz Stockhausen. René Leibowitz acclaimed the composer von Webern with his book Schoenberg et son école in 1947. These developments provided the ground for new styles and musical modernity. In the work La musique et l'ineffable, the philosopher and musicologist Vladimir Zankovich sketches the aesthetics of the ineffable, what cannot be described and what is ambiguous. This concept, distant from classical views, takes the music of Debussy as reference. The postmodernists reformulated the Wagnerian concept of Gesamtkunstwerk. Stockhausen developed concepts and aesthetics in musical harmony based on the opera Gesang durch den Lingel, and is recognized for being the first piece of electroacoustic music. This composition combines the musical heritage of two musical schools of thought, the French concrete school of Pierre Schaeffer and the German electronic music of the 1950s. In this rupture, Stockhausen shares ideas with John Cage and Lamonti Young, both related to the Fluxus movement. John Cage worked on the concept of anti-opera, where different art forms coexist in the same place without connections or obligation other than just to happen at the same time. John Cage's Imaginary Landscape No. 1 is considered to be the first piece of classical electronic music, and it marks a major turn in contemporary arts. His influence is present in the performance arts through the Fluxus movement that is instigated, presents concepts of chaos, silence, randomness, and is represented across all the arts, but especially in audio and visual. Technologically, the work of John Cage is all-inspiring and pioneering, and from this point on, music and sound, visual and performative arts develop in different ways. John Cage's ideas seem to be the point from where we reach our contemporary views.